It was supposed to be like any other night. A movie, a few laughs, just like always. But that night, everything changed. Mason, my older brother, the one I've shared everything with, did something that completely threw me off. When he kissed me, I should have pulled away, right? But I didn't. And deep down, I couldn't help but wonder, had I been waiting for this all along? That moment, it set everything in motion, and now I'm left with more questions than answers. What happens when the person closest to you makes you question everything you've ever known? Keep listening. This is just the beginning. At first it was subtle. Just small shifts I barely noticed. At least, that's what I told myself. But there was something different about Mason now. It was in the way he looked at me. It wasn't the same way he used to, when we were just kids, sharing bunk beds and laughing about who would win in a fight between Batman and Spider-Man. No, now it was something deeper. A look that lingered just a little too long, a smirk that seemed to hold an unspoken question. It all started that summer, I think. The words Mason used to call me started to change. He stopped calling me kid and started calling me pretty boy. And maybe I laughed it off at first, but inside, something stirred, something I wasn't ready to confront. When your brother, someone who's been your best friend your entire life, starts seeing you differently, it's hard not to notice. But that wasn't all. It was the way he'd tease me now. Playful, sure, but with a different energy. A certain edge to it. It wasn't like the old jokes that never made me second guess myself. No, this was different. This felt like more. He'd flash me that cocky grin, and suddenly, I felt like I was under a spotlight. But I wasn't the only one who noticed the shift. Mason was changing too, and I didn't know if it was just me seeing things, or if it was real. The teasing went from harmless fun to something heavier, something that made my chest tighten. At first I tried to brush it off, tell myself it was just Mason being his usual charming self. After all, he'd always been the one who knew how to get away with saying the most inappropriate things, but he'd always followed them up with a wink or a laugh. Yet lately, there was no wink, no laugh, just silence. And I hated how much I looked forward to it. Hated how much I wanted him to keep looking at me like that. Then, there were the moments when our bodies were closer than before, when his hand brushed mine just a little too often, when our knees accidentally bumped against each other under the dinner table. Those were the moments that made my heart skip a beat. And when it was just the two of us, alone in the house, well, that's when the air seemed to shift the most. It wasn't like before, when we were just two brothers, two friends. No, now there was tension, a thick, unspoken thing that hung in the air between us. But I wasn't the only one feeling it. I could see it in Mason too. I could see how he struggled with it, how he pulled back sometimes and how other times he got too close, too fast. His smiles lingered a little longer. His touch felt more deliberate, and the worst part, I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to say. It was like we were both dancing around something, and neither of us was brave enough to step into it fully. We both felt it, but neither of us wanted to admit it. One night, it came to a head. It was late, past midnight, and we were both lying in our beds, just like we always did. The house was quiet, and the soft hum of the ceiling fan was the only sound. And then, without warning, Mason said something that shook me to my core. Want to practice kissing? I remember the way my heart stopped in my chest. Was he joking? Was he serious? I didn't know. But the way he said it, the way his voice carried just a hint of something I couldn't name, told me he wasn't just messing around. And I hated that I felt a rush of excitement flood my body. I tried to laugh it off, to tell him he was being ridiculous, but there was a tremble in my voice that I couldn't hide. I was nervous. Hell, I was terrified. But I was also curious. Curious in a way I shouldn't have been. I couldn't understand it, and that scared me more than anything. I rolled over, facing the wall, hoping the darkness would somehow hide the chaos I felt inside. But the tension didn't go away. It stayed there, thick in the air, hanging between us. The room was still, but my mind was racing. Every thought felt like a tangled mess, and the one thing I couldn't shake was the idea of him. The way his body moved, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It was like he was testing me, testing us, and I was failing, miserably. The next day, everything felt different. Mason's teasing continued, but it wasn't the same. It was charged, heavier, and I didn't know how to react anymore. I found myself thinking about him in ways I shouldn't, ways that made me uncomfortable and confused. I tried to push those thoughts away, but they kept coming back. And the worst part, I didn't want them to go away. It was in the way he touched me when we were working together. The briefest of brushes, a lingering hand on my shoulder, a look that said more than words ever could. And every time it happened, I found myself reacting in ways I couldn't explain. My heart raced, my palms went sweaty, and I couldn't stop myself from wanting more. I started questioning everything I thought I knew about us. What did all of this mean? Was this just a phase? Was Mason just messing around? Or was there something real here? Something that neither of us was willing to admit? And more importantly, what did I do now? Could I walk away from these feelings, or was I already too deep? I couldn't talk to anyone about this. How could I? Who would understand? It wasn't just some passing crush. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of curiosity. This was different, and that terrified me. But as much as I wanted to ignore it, I couldn't. The change in our relationship was undeniable, and it wasn't just in how Mason treated me. It was in how I treated him too. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. I couldn't pretend that nothing had shifted, and that's when I knew there was no going back. Something had changed, and now I had to figure out what that meant. For me, for Mason, for us. Would we stay this way, pretending nothing had happened? Pretending the connection we shared wasn't something more? Or would we confront it, face it head on, and figure out what comes next? What we shared, whatever it was real. And the question was, could we handle it? Could we move forward? Or would we let it tear us apart? The future was unclear, but one thing was certain. We couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore. And whatever came next, it was up to us to decide how to face it. But there was a weight in the silence that followed, a heaviness that neither of us could shake. I knew one thing for sure. Everything between us had changed. And now, we had to figure out what that meant for both of us. The night was heavy, thick with the tension that had been building between us for weeks. Every glance, every touch had led to this moment. I could feel it in the air. Our usual banter was gone, replaced by something deeper, something unspoken, but undeniable. I was lying there, in the dark, with Mason just a few feet away, and the silence between us felt like it was closing in on me. His voice broke the quiet, a soft whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. Want to practice kissing? I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For a split second, I wondered if I had misheard him, if this was just one of his jokes, the kind he always made to mess with me. But there was no laugh to follow this time, no playful smirk. Just that soft, quiet challenge in his voice that made everything inside me shift. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound that came out of me was high-pitched and shaky, nothing like the casual chuckles we usually shared. My heart was racing, my thoughts scattered. I had no idea how to respond. Mason, my brother. The guy I'd grown up with. The one I'd shared everything with. The one I'd trusted with my secrets, my fears. And now, here he was, saying something that had the power to change everything between us. Something that could unravel every idea I'd ever had about who we were. What we were. I turned away, facing the wall, hoping the darkness would somehow shield me from the storm of emotions that were suddenly crashing through me. But it didn't. Nothing could. In that moment, I realized something. I didn't want to push him away. I didn't want to laugh it off or pretend it was a joke. I didn't want to run from whatever this was. But I was scared, terrified of what it meant, terrified of what would happen if I gave in. It wasn't just the physical closeness that unsettled me. It was everything. The way he looked at me now, the way his touch lingered just a little too long, the way his smile seemed to hold a secret I wasn't sure I was ready to know. It wasn't just the brotherly teasing anymore. It was more than that. It felt real, too real. I could feel my breath coming faster, my chest tight with something that felt like both excitement and fear. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to tell him it was a joke, that it didn't matter. But my body was betraying me. I wanted him closer. I wanted to understand what was happening between us. And then there was the kiss. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't rushed. There was no urgency in it. Just a slow, deliberate movement that seemed to take forever and no time at all. His lips met mine gently, as though he was waiting for me to pull away, to stop him. But I didn't. I didn't move. I didn't pull back. Instead, I let myself feel everything. The warmth of his skin, the softness of his lips, the steady rhythm of his breath as it mingled with mine. I could feel every inch of my body responding, the heat building in places I didn't know how to process. There was a calm in that moment, a clarity that cut through the chaos in my head. For a second, nothing else existed. Just him and me. No questions, no doubts, no hesitation. Just this kiss, and everything it meant. Or maybe everything it didn't mean. But as quickly as the kiss had started, it ended. Mason pulled away, his eyes searching mine, looking for something. An answer, maybe. A sign that I felt the same way, that I wasn't just as confused as he was. But there was nothing clear in my mind. Only the deafening noise of my racing heart. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. But in that kiss, I knew something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed between us. It was no longer just about the teasing or the glances, or the small moments. It was real, it was raw, and it was terrifying. I wanted to say something, to break the silence, to tell him that everything had changed, that I didn't know what this meant, but I couldn't. My throat was tight, and the words didn't come. All I could do was lie there, my heart pounding, my mind spinning in circles, wondering if this was the beginning of something beautiful or something we would both regret. Mason didn't speak either. He just watched me, waiting for me to say something, to make sense of it. But how could I? How could I explain the whirlwind of emotions that had taken over in the span of just a few seconds? How could I explain that? In that moment, I didn't feel afraid anymore. But I still didn't know what to do with the overwhelming desire, the want, the confusion that was settling deep within me. Eventually, the silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until Mason's voice cut through it softly, almost unsure. That was a mistake. The words hit me harder than I expected. A mistake? I blinked, trying to wrap my head around what he was saying. A mistake. How could something so intense, so real, be a mistake? I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. The truth was, I didn't know how I felt about what had just happened. Part of me wanted to tell him he was wrong, that it wasn't a mistake. But the other part of me, the part that was terrified of everything we had just crossed, stayed silent. It was in that silence that I understood something. Whatever had just happened between us, however confusing, however wrong it felt in the moment, it wasn't something we could take back. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back to how things were before. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how to process it, how to make sense of this new, uncertain space we were now in. But one thing was clear. This moment, the kiss, the confusion, the chaos, it had changed everything. And whatever happened after this, whatever decisions we made, nothing would ever be the same. And so, as we lay there in the aftermath, neither of us spoke. But in the silence, I could feel the weight of the decision we had just made, the weight of the truth we had just uncovered. It was too much to process all at once, but somehow, I knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that neither of us was ready for, but one we would have to take together, no matter how uncertain the road ahead seemed. But for now, all I could do was lie there, feeling the echo of the kiss, and wondering if Mason felt the same, if he too knew that this was just the start of something we couldn't undo, the start of something that would change everything, for both of us. The days that followed were heavy, thick with uncertainty. Every step I took, every look I shared with Mason felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. The kiss, the moment everything shifted, had left me drowning in questions I didn't know how to ask. Was this just a mistake? A momentary lapse? Or was it something deeper, something real? And if it was real, how could we face it? How could we both deal with the mess we'd just made? In the silence that filled the house, it was as if the air itself was charged, waiting for one of us to speak up, to break the tension. But neither of us did. Mason, who had always been so confident, so open, had pulled away, as if afraid to acknowledge the gravity of what we'd shared. And I was no better. I was just as afraid. Afraid of what I was feeling. Afraid of what Mason might be feeling. Afraid of where this would lead. We both tiptoed around each other like strangers, afraid to confront what was real. The thing was, it wasn't just about the kiss anymore. That moment, that fragile, charged moment, had opened the door to something far bigger. It wasn't about the physicality of it, or the thrill of being close to someone in a way that felt different. It was about the emotional truth that was hanging between us now. Something we could no longer ignore. Something that, no matter how hard we tried, couldn't be erased. As the days passed, I found myself grappling with emotions I wasn't sure how to name. My mind kept returning to the kiss, replaying it over and over again. It wasn't just the warmth of his lips on mine or the way his breath mingled with mine. It was the connection, the way the world seemed to disappear when we were together, like it was just the two of us and nothing else mattered. It felt real, too real. But that's where the chaos began. Because if it was real, then what did that mean for us? What did it mean for our relationship, for our family? The questions tangled up inside me, suffocating me. How could I reconcile the feeling of something so beautiful with the fear of what it might cost us? I tried to push it away. I tried to ignore the flutter in my chest whenever Mason was near. I tried to bury the longing, the desire to be close to him in a way I'd never imagined before. But the more I tried to push it down, the more it grew. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't pretend it wasn't there. And then there were the moments when Mason wasn't there, when his absence felt like a void that pulled me deeper into myself. I missed him, more than I should have, and that scared me. How could I miss someone so much? Someone who had always been there, but now felt so far away, like a part of him was slipping through my fingers. It wasn't just physical distance either, it was emotional. The distance between us grew in subtle ways. The playful teasing was gone, replaced with an awkward silence that neither of us knew how to fill. There were no more casual jokes, no more late-night conversations about everything and nothing. There was only a growing wall between us, made of unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us to make things feel normal again. Every time I tried to speak to him, the words got stuck in my throat. I didn't want to say the wrong thing, didn't want to make it worse, but the silence was killing me. And Mason? He seemed to be retreating into himself even more. He was avoiding me, pulling away, and it hurt in ways I couldn't explain. He had always been the confident one, the one who made everything feel easy. But now, he was just as lost as I was, trying to navigate something neither of us had ever expected, something neither of us knew how to handle. The hardest part, it wasn't just the confusion, it was the guilt that weighed on me, telling me that what had happened between us was wrong, that we had crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed. I tried to convince myself that it didn't mean anything, that it was just a mistake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew that what we shared wasn't something you could just brush off. It was too real, too intense. I spent hours lying awake, thinking about it all, wondering if Mason was feeling the same way, or if he had just been caught up in the moment. Wondering if he regretted it, wondering if we could ever go back to the way things were before. I wanted to talk to him, to confront the mess we had made, but I didn't know how. I didn't know if I was ready to face the truth. It wasn't until a week later, when the tension had reached a boiling point, that Mason came to me. He walked into my room, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame. It was something raw, something real, but also full of uncertainty. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual, his gaze dropping to the floor. I didn't know what to say. I nodded, unable to form the words that were stuck in my throat. We sat in silence for a moment. The air between us felt thick, heavy with everything we hadn't said, everything we were too afraid to confront. Finally, Mason spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for things to get so complicated. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in. Neither did I admitted. But we can't pretend it didn't happen. He nodded, his hand gripping the edge of the chair, as if he were holding on to something for dear life. I know, but I don't know what to do with it. With us. I could feel my chest tighten, the uncertainty crashing into me like a wave. I don't know either, I confessed. I don't know. We sat there for a while longer, saying nothing but feeling everything. The silence spoke volumes, and in that silence, I realized something. We couldn't go back. We couldn't undo what had happened, but we could choose to face it. Together. We could choose to confront what was real, no matter how scary it seemed. Mason finally broke the silence, his voice low but steady. I don't regret it. Not what happened between us, but I'm scared. I'm scared of what it means. I'm scared of what it's going to cost us. I looked at him, my heart heavy with a mixture of relief and fear. I'm scared too, I said, my voice trembling slightly. But we can't keep pretending like nothing changed. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, side by side, letting the silence settle around us like a blanket. And in that silence, I realized that whatever happened next, whatever this connection was, we would have to face it together. We would have to face what was real, even if it didn't make sense. Even if it scared us both. We had crossed a line, but we didn't have to run from it. We didn't have to pretend it wasn't there. We could choose to move forward, even if we didn't know what that looked like. And so, we sat together in that quiet space, the weight of everything we hadn't said hanging in the air. We didn't have answers. We didn't have a plan, but we had each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. As I sat there with Mason, I realized something else. It wasn't the kiss, or the confusion, or the fear that defined us. It was the choice we made to confront it, to acknowledge it, and to find a way to move forward. It was the courage to face what was real, even when it was hard. And that in itself was something worth holding on to. The tension that had lingered in the days following our unspoken confrontation felt like a weight I could never quite shake off. Every time Mason and I were in the same room, there was an undeniable heaviness between us. Something unspoken, something unacknowledged. We had spent so long pretending that everything was normal, that nothing had changed. But we both knew better. Things had shifted between us, and neither of us was willing to confront the truth. But the thing about truths, they don't stay hidden forever. They have a way of creeping to the surface when you least expect it. And eventually, we had to face it. We couldn't keep running away from what was right in front of us. That morning, after days of quiet tension, I found myself standing in front of Mason's door. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rehearsed. But the urge to finally confront what had been gnawing at both of us for days was undeniable. There was no more pretending, no more silence. I could feel the weight of the moment building in my chest. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew we couldn't keep avoiding the truth any longer. I knocked softly on the door, my hand trembling slightly. When Mason opened it, he didn't look surprised to see me standing there. There was no hesitation in his eyes, no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding that something had to be said. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything we hadn't yet discussed. Mason stepped back, motioning for me to come in, and I followed him into the room, my heart pounding in my chest. We sat down on his bed, a familiar space that suddenly felt strange. There was an eerie calm in the room, almost as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for one of us to break the silence. "I've been thinking about everything," I started, unsure of exactly what I wanted to say, but knowing I needed to start somewhere. "About the kiss, about what happened between us." Mason's gaze softened, and I could see the vulnerability in his eyes. He had been holding this inside for longer than I had, and now that we were finally facing it, I could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of us. "I know," he said quietly. "I've been thinking about it too." There was a heaviness in his voice that I hadn't heard before, raw, unfiltered, and full of emotion. It made me realize just how much he had been carrying, just how much he had been struggling with the same feelings I was now facing. "I'm not sure what it means," I confessed. "I don't know what we're supposed to do with all of this, but I can't keep pretending it doesn't matter. What happened between us, it's not something I can just forget." Mason was silent for a moment, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to read the words I hadn't yet spoken. And then, with a quiet sigh, he reached out and touched my hand. It was such a simple gesture, yet it carried so much weight. A silent acknowledgement of everything we hadn't said out loud. "I don't want to pretend either," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to pretend that I don't care about you. I don't want to pretend that what happened between us doesn't mean something. Because it does. It means everything." I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. The truth, finally spoken aloud, felt like a release, a weight being lifted off my chest. All the confusion, all the fear, all the guilt, it was finally being acknowledged. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. "I've been scared," Mason continued, his voice trembling slightly. "Scared of what it means. Scared of what people will think. Scared of losing you. But I can't keep pretending that I don't feel this. I don't know what we're supposed to do with it, but I know I don't want to lose you." The words he spoke were both freeing and terrifying. There was so much honesty in them, so much raw emotion, that it felt like we were standing at the edge of something we couldn't take back. But in that moment, I realized something. We had already crossed a line, and it wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward, together. "I don't want to lose you either," I said, my voice shaking as I reached out to take his hand in mine. "I don't know what this means, but I know I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to live in fear of what we feel. I want to face it. I want to figure it out, even if it's messy." Mason's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something like relief flicker across his face. The tension that had been building between us for so long seemed to ease, and in its place, there was something new, something fragile but beautiful. "I'm scared too," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't keep pretending like nothing's changed. I don't know what this is, but I'm not going to run from it. Not anymore." In that moment, I realized that we had both been carrying the same weight, afraid to face the truth, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what would happen next. But now, finally, we were facing it together, and somehow, that felt like enough. "We'll figure it out," I said softly, my heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. "Together. Whatever happens next, we'll face it. We won't run from it." Mason nodded, his grip tightening on my hand. Together. And in that simple word, I felt everything click into place. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know what the future would look like. But we knew we couldn't go back to the way things were. The truth had been spoken, and it was raw and uncertain, but it was ours. And somehow, that made everything feel more real than it ever had before. We didn't have to pretend anymore. We didn't have to hide behind the walls we had built up to protect ourselves. We could face the truth, no matter how complicated or messy it was. And in doing so, we were finally free. The breakthrough wasn't some grand, dramatic moment. It wasn't about a sudden epiphany or a neat resolution. It was simply about facing what was real, acknowledging the truth, even when it scared us. And in that quiet, uncertain moment, we both knew that whatever happened next, we would face it together. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. But for the first time, I felt ready to walk into it, whatever it was, with Mason by my side. The moment we had been dancing around for so long had finally come. The silence between us was no longer the heavy weight it once was. It had been replaced with something else, something lighter, but no less important. The truth. The truth that we had both been avoiding for weeks now. The truth we had finally decided to confront. But facing it was only half the battle. What came next? How do you move forward when the road ahead is unknown, and the world around you insists on labeling your every step? That was the question that hung in the air between us, unanswered, like a puzzle we could never quite figure out. The reality was that neither of us had the answers. Not yet. But maybe that's what scared us both the most, the uncertainty. The idea that we were standing on the edge of something, but we had no idea where it would take us. What would the world think? What would happen to us if we took that step forward, hand in hand, without knowing what would come next? But then, in the quiet of that room, with Mason's eyes meeting mine with such raw sincerity, I realized something. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe the question wasn't about what the world would think, or even what tomorrow would bring. Maybe the real question was, what do we want to do with this? What do we want to make of this moment, of this connection that had been slowly growing between us? I couldn't keep running from it, not anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that this wasn't real, that these feelings didn't exist. It was terrifying, sure. The unknown always is. But in the end, isn't that what life is? A series of decisions made in the face of uncertainty. How could I possibly know the future? How could either of us? But what I did know was that I didn't want to lose Mason, and I didn't want to lose this. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all sink in. I don't know what comes next, Mason, I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty that still lingered. But I know that I want to move forward. With you. I don't want to keep living in this in-between place. I don't want to keep pretending that this doesn't matter. We can't go back, and honestly, I don't think I would want to. But I need you to know that I'm here. Whatever happens next, I'm here. Mason didn't say anything at first. For a moment, he just looked at me, as if he were weighing my words against his own feelings. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he reached out. His hand brushed mine gently at first, almost tentative, like he wasn't sure how much he could touch me. But then he held it, his fingers curling around mine, holding on as though he was afraid I might slip away. I don't have all the answers either, he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of its own. I don't know what this means, what it's supposed to mean, but I'm tired of hiding from it. I'm tired of pretending that it doesn't matter. I want to move forward too. I don't know where we're headed, but I know that I can't do it without you. His words were everything I needed to hear. It was like a light broke through the darkness. For so long, we had been trapped in this web of uncertainty and confusion. But now, here we were, choosing each other, choosing to face whatever came next, despite not knowing what it would be. Maybe there was comfort in that. In the idea that life doesn't always have to have a clear roadmap. Maybe the beauty was in the journey, in the way two people could walk through it together, hand in hand, even when they couldn't see what lay ahead. We didn't need answers. We didn't need all the right words. What we needed was a commitment to each other, to whatever this was, and the courage to walk forward even when we didn't know where the path would lead. You're not alone in this, I said, my voice filled with quiet conviction. We're in this together. No matter what happens next, I'm not running. Not from you. Not from this. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how uncertain the road ahead might be, this was a decision that we were both willing to make. Together. It wasn't easy. And it wasn't instant. There were still doubts, still questions hanging in the air, but the decision was made. We were going to move forward. We were going to face whatever came next, no matter how difficult, no matter how complicated, because we had each other. And that, in itself, was enough. The world might not understand. The world might judge, but at that moment it didn't matter. What mattered was what we chose. What mattered was the promise we made to ourselves and to each other. The choice to embrace what was real, even if it didn't fit into anyone's neat little box. The choice to step into the unknown together, despite the uncertainty. There was still so much we didn't know, so much we had yet to figure out. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of what we had or where it would go, because whatever happened next, I knew we would face it together. And maybe that's the most important thing, choosing to move forward, even when everything else feels uncertain. The decision to keep going, to not give up on what feels real, no matter how hard it might get. There's a strength in that, a quiet power that doesn't need to shout, a power that comes from knowing who you are, what you want, and who you want to be with. It was our choice to make, and I was ready. Ready for whatever came next, because we had already made the most important decision, to be together, no matter what. And as I stood there, my hand in Mason's, I knew one thing for sure. The journey ahead would be ours to face. And I wouldn't have it any other way. What comes next? I don't know. But I know we'll face it together. And for now, that's enough. As we stood there, hands intertwined, facing an uncertain future, something within me settled. The tension that had once filled the air now felt different. It was no longer one of fear or doubt, but one of quiet resolve. We didn't have all the answers. We weren't sure where the road ahead would lead, but there was a certainty in our hearts that we hadn't felt before. It was as though the storm we'd weathered had finally passed, leaving in its wake a calm that we both needed, even if we didn't fully understand it yet. What had started as confusion, as something that felt so impossible to understand, was now slowly transforming into something far more powerful. Something real. Something solid. We had made a choice, and in that choice, we had given each other something precious. Trust. A promise that no matter how much the world might try to pull us apart, we would stand by each other. We had chosen to walk forward, not knowing what would come next, but choosing to face it together. And that, in itself, felt like enough. It's strange how life works, isn't it? How everything can shift in the blink of an eye. How one moment can change everything. The fear, the uncertainty, the weight of the unknown. It all faded when we realized that what we had was ours. The world might judge. The world might try to tell us what's right or wrong. But in the end, it's the quiet promises we make to ourselves and to the ones we love that matter most. The promise to stand firm, to move forward even when the way ahead is unclear. What comes next is still a mystery, but that's part of the beauty, isn't it? To live with the unknown, to embrace the journey, and to have the courage to step into it with someone by your side. The future is unpredictable, yes, but it's also full of possibilities. And the promise we made, the commitment to face what's ahead together, is one I hold tightly to. So, as we move forward, step by step, I know this. Whatever happens, we will face it. We will grow, we will learn, and we will continue to choose each other every single day. And that's a promise that doesn't need words, only the quiet understanding between two hearts that know they've found something real. If there's anything to take away from this journey, it's this. Life is full of moments, moments of uncertainty, of joy, of fear. But it's in those moments that we find our strength. In those moments, we choose who we are and who we want to become. And in choosing that, we create a future we can be proud of. If you've ever felt uncertain, if you've ever felt like your journey wasn't clear, Just know this: you're not alone. We're all finding our way. And sometimes, it's the quiet promise of what's to come that keeps us moving forward. So let's embrace it together. The best is yet to come.